Hopefully you have seen part 1, 2, and 3 of Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots. And in those videos I show you from scripture why Jerusalem and her people are Mystery Babylon in the book of Revelation, in Revelation 18. So if we're looking at Revelation 18, I want to take this in another direction than I did before in the last 3 videos. But having determined that Jerusalem and the sons and daughters of Zion are Mystery Babylon the Great, we see in Revelation 18 the fall of Babylon the Great. First, let me just say and repeat this verse that Revelation 18 verse 3 says, "For all the nations have drunk the wine of the wrath of her fornication." So that's an indicator that Mystery Babylon the Great is Jerusalem, and then the rest of the nations have drunk of the wine of her fornication, and the merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of her luxury. So God says, "Come out of her, my people," which he always calls Israel, unless you are going to share in her sins and plagues. So let's get down here to the finality of Babylon's fall, and I want to point out the very last section of this paragraph. It says, "Then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, 'Thus with violence the great city, Babylon, shall be thrown down and shall not be found any more. The sound of harpists, musicians, flutists, and trumpeters shall not be heard in you any more. No craftsman of any craft shall be found in you any more. And the sound of a millstone shall not be heard in you any more.'" This is the part that I want to pinpoint, where it says in verse 23, "The light of a lamp shall not shine in you any more, and the voice of bridegroom and bride shall not be heard in you any more. For your merchants were the great men of the earth. For by your sorcery all the nations were deceived. And in her was found the blood of prophets and saints and of all who were slain on the earth." So you know, during the diaspora, when the Jews were scattered into all nations, they were the great merchants of the earth, and they sold their wares, they sold their fabrics, they sold, you know, spices, basically anything. And also, when this Mystery Babylon the Great does fall, there's no more marrying and being given in marriage, because the Messiah, the bridegroom, will be coming at the end of the time of Jacob's trouble. So we're going to be married to him. So as we know, this word sorcery here is the Greek word pharmakia, and all the nations were deceived by her sorceries. So let's just see, in Thayer's Greek lexicon, pharmakia is number 5331, and pharmakia, it gives A, B, and C definitions. It says the use or the administering of drugs, B, poisoning, and C, sorcery, magical arts often found in connection with idolatry and fostered by it. Tropically, of the deceptions and seductions of idolatry. Mystery Babylon the Great is written on her forehead. This is like the mark of the beast, and it means defilement. And I pointed out that the Lord revealed to me about the hand would be the wedding hand, where she's betrayed her husband, which is God, and turned against him. So the mark of the beast would be the defilement, and she has a whore's forehead, and you know, the wedding band that signifies that you're married is also defiled because she's committed fornication against the Lord. And that makes the most sense to me, as far as the mark of the beast being on the forehead and on the hand. When we read about the two witnesses, they come to Jerusalem clothed in sackcloth and ashes. They're in lamentation. And they're killed in the streets of Jerusalem. I believe this is going to be ordered by the Supreme Court, which is going to be the Sanhedrin at that time. And they want themselves to be elevated as the world court. They want to eliminate the United Nations and put the 70 nations in the Sanhedrin building to have representatives from each nation to be under their authority and rule, basically. That would be there in Jerusalem when they build the Sanhedrin building, which I actually saw and touched the blueprints for that building. Saw it with my own eyes when Rabbi Chaim Richman came out here to speak at a place that was fairly close, and I went to hear his lecture. It's interesting, if you look up this word sorcery, it's also in another place, number 3785, kashef, and it is a noun, masculine, sorcery, and sorceries, and it says literal, and it is said of Israel and said of Babylon. So Israel has become mystery, Babylon. And it also says figurative of seductive and corrupting influences, like a Jezebel. Of course, the city of Nineveh was personified also as a harlot. It's interesting that I've been revealing about mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, as being Jerusalem, and I showed all the evidence from Scripture, and it is said of Israel and said of Babylon, so that seals it there too, that Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, is Israel, and that's what it's going to be in the last days. And I think things are going to get far more complicated over there when they start implementing their specific laws that we know about, and they try to project those on to all the Gentiles of the nations. And if you don't bow down to taking their mark or believing what they're telling you, then they're not going to have any use for you. We know about the two witnesses that are witnessing the last gospel message to try to get God's people to repent and turn to Him as their king. It says when they're killed, and I believe they'll be judged and condemned by the Sanhedrin when they do that world court and make themselves elevated as controlling, you know, the world system here. It says that the two witnesses, their bodies will lie in the public square of the great city, which we know is Jerusalem, which is figuratively called Sodom and Egypt, where also their Lord was crucified. So we had the sorceries when they were in Egypt. They had the magic and the magicians, the ones that opposed Moses, performing magic to try to match what Moses would do by the power and rod of God. And now these sorceries have tainted her, and she's taken it to all the nations. And this pharmakia is a big end time, I don't know what you want to call it. It's just that she's deceived the nations with these things, this sorcery that, you know, originally came out of Egypt and Sodom. And in Sodom, they were also building the ziggurats and, you know, the pyramids and things that came out of Egypt. So they were in God's land, and God destroyed all of that under layers and layers of sulfur and brimstone and, you know, the hot heat that was a purple flame that was so intense that nothing could survive, and the gases that came out of it was a choking gas, and they perished, and all of these layers of ash are still there in the area around part of the Dead Sea region. You can see this, you know, ziggurat shapes and all of that. The ziggurat was also in ancient Babylon that has been destroyed as well. When the term pharmakia is used, where it says that she deceived all the nations through her sorcery, and it's talking about the administering of drugs, poisoning, magical arts, in connection with idolatry, which was from the harlotry and committing fornication against God with all of these lovers that she had brought into the land, and, you know, foreigners that would come in, and it said in the Bible that she, you know, committed fornication with these people. So here we have something really interesting when we're talking about the magic that came out of Egypt and how they were trying to kind of impersonate what Moses was doing by the power of God. So, where am I going to go this time? You're not going to believe this, but since the fact of just being diabetic since the summer of 2017 and dealing with this issue and eventually getting so bad off that I had to take insulin. So one day when I got the pen needle box, I saw this little tiny image in the lower left-hand corner and around on the back side of the box for the company that makes the diabetic pen needles and also some of the insulin. And I couldn't believe what I was looking at, and it always was really bothering me. So I eventually, just recently, decided to look this up to see why this was their logo. Do you see this? This is their logo. And I knew it was the Egyptian bull or the golden calf image from ancient Egypt that the Hebrews built out in the wilderness of Sinai. That Egyptian bull is accompanied by this number on the side of the box, a large number 6. And this is what the bull image looks like on the side of the pen needle box. Now we know for a long time that they've been tampering with our food and taking nutrients out and stopped serving vegetables at most restaurants, and all you get is fries, 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 something that you're not supposed to eat, carbs and all of that if you are diabetic. So what they've done is they've made about 50% of the population to be diabetics and to be dependent on insulin. And this company has this Egyptian logo with the number 6, and they are serving insulin to all of these people worldwide. So just let me tell you a little bit about this company. Novo Nordisk employs more than 48,000 people globally and markets its products in 168 countries. The corporation was created in 1989 through a merger of 2 Danish companies which date back to the 1920s. The Novo Nordisk logo is the Apis bull, one of the sacred animals of ancient Egypt. Is that disturbing or what? More about the logo. It says the Novo Nordisk company's logo, a bull with a sun disk between its horns, is based on the Egyptian deity Apis. Now this is what they would have chiseled on the rock in Mount Sinai. When the Hebrews were in the wilderness and they built the golden calf, this would have been it. This would have been it. But they hammered their gold earrings and their jewelry that they took out of Egypt, and they made this golden calf out of it, and they bowed down to worship it. And that's just kind of similar to what some people showed with a Spanish bull that some people supposedly bowed down to. Although I wasn't really sure that that's exactly correct. But nevertheless, that's what was done at the Commonwealth Games opening ceremony or something in the UK. And Off the Curb, he talks about that particular event. And he talks about the connections of Baal and Beelzebub being this bull, represented as a bull. So there you have her sorceries and the administration of drugs. So after seeing this disturbing truth about the logo, that it really was depicting the Egyptian bull god Apis, which was exactly the golden calf of the ancient Hebrews that offended God when Moses came down from the mountain, and he saw it, he crushed it to powder. Well, I was thinking, why would this company use that Egyptian bull god on their boxes of pen needles, and also, you know, representing the insulin that they dole out to the world, and administering drugs worldwide through their quote-unquote sorceries, which is the administrating of drugs. And the reason why I found out, this is probably why they used that Egyptian bull god as their logo, and it was because diabetes was one of the first diseases described with an Egyptian manuscript from 1500 BCE mentioning too great emptying of the urine. The Ebers Papyrus includes a recommendation for a drink to be taken in such cases. The first described cases are believed to be of type 1 diabetes. So it was something that was found on a hieroglyph in ancient Egypt, and so they decided to make that deity of the bull god, of the golden calf, the image for their logo. Are you kidding me? So that now this company can become wealthy and rich. And you're not going to believe what else I discovered about this. So when I looked up who started the pharmaceutical industry, it says the answer is none other than Sir Humphrey Pauper. This is the man who created the first pharmaceutical drugs and later on contributed heavily to their development. Pauper was a chemist working for Raffles Pharmaceuticals Limited. He later went on to develop penicillin, which is one of the most important and effective drugs in the world today. And then it goes on to talk all about how he developed the world's first drug. And this is kind of interesting. It says, how did Pauper invent the world's first drug? He was searching for a way of creating a less hazardous drug. It was clear that any drug that could be created without causing any health problems was preferable. In his quest, he stumbled upon sodium iodide, which is one of the most toxic substances known to man. He realized that it would be impossible for a drug to be created that would not have any side effects. So naturally, he had to invent a safe alternative. Upon hearing this news, the chemist Carl Wilhelm Scheele was convinced that there must be an alternative source of medical treatments. After creating the stabilizing agent, sodium iodide, he headed a team of chemists, scientists, and experts to test it out on animals. They were shocked at the results, and after trying many methods to save the drug from going extinct, they eventually discovered that saltwater solutions contained enough iodine to cure all diseases. I hope you heard that last sentence. He discovered that saltwater solutions contained enough iodine to cure all diseases. So when I looked up the genealogy of this Sir Humphrey Popper, that is an Ashkenazic Jewish name. Under the website HebrewSurnames.com, Popper, genealogy, the vast majority of Argentine Jews are descended from immigrants who arrived from Europe. These Ashkenazic Jews migrated from small towns of Poland, Lithuania, Russia, Germany, Romania, Ukraine, leaving behind most of their Jewish relatives. After 2 or 3 generations, those Jewish families lost track of their relatives, having been saved from the war, immigrated to other countries like USA, England, and Australia. And it was in England that Sir Humphrey Popper created the pharmaceutical industry. Also, if you look up the history during the diaspora, the Jewish merchants were trading their wares out of suitcases and all of that. They had everything from linens to spices to glassware, royal purple, silk, you name it. They had luxuries that they sold as the great merchants of the earth. Novo Nordisk, the company, manufactures and markets pharmaceutical products and services, specifically diabetes care. That company is a member of the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries and Associations. And that group is a Brussels-based trade association and lobbying organization founded in 1978 and representing the research-based pharmaceutical industry operating in Europe. Through its membership of 37 national associations and 38 leading pharmaceutical companies, the EFPIA So now, knowing that by her sorceries, meaning Jerusalem and the sons and daughters of Zion, being Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, and by her sorceries all the nations were deceived, or, you know, they were dragged into this Babylon connection. Through all of this, let me just read this shocking article to you, because this is from the Department of Justice, the Office of Public Affairs, and this was written Monday, May 11th in 2009. This is justice.gov. Novo Nordisk is, their main headquarters is in Denmark. This says, Novo Nordisk agrees to pay $9 million fine in connection with payment of $1.4 million in kickbacks through the United Nations Oil for Food program. Can you believe that? Novo Nordisk, A/S, Novo, a Danish corporation based in Bagsværd, Denmark has agreed to pay a $9 million penalty for illegal kickbacks paid to the former Iraqi government. Where was ancient Babylon? In Iraq. They were giving the Iraqi government these kickbacks, and that's where ancient Babylon was. Unbelievable. Novo agreed to pay the fine as part of a deferred prosecution agreement with the department. The matter is part of the Justice Department's ongoing investigation into the United Nations Oil for Food program. Now, this was quite a while ago, but just connecting all of the dots here, it's amazing. A criminal information was filed today against Novo in U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia, charging Novo with one count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and to violate the books and records provisions of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which is known as FCPA. Novo, an international manufacturer of insulin, medicines, and other pharmaceutical supplies, has acknowledged responsibility for improper payments made by its agents to the former Iraqi government in order to obtain contracts with the Iraqi Ministry of Health to provide insulin and other medicines. The agreement requires the company and its subsidiaries to cooperate fully with the Justice Department's ongoing oil for food investigation. Now, this did happen in 2009, so I don't know what's developed since then, but according to the agreement and the information filed today, between 2001 and 2003, Novo paid approximately $1.4 million to the former Iraqi government by inflating the price of contracts by 10% before submitting the contracts to the United Nations for approval, and concealed from the United Nations the fact that the price contained a kickback to the former Iraqi government. Novo also admitted it inaccurately recorded the kickback payments as commissions in its books and records. In recognition of Novo's thorough review of the illicit payments and its implementation of enhanced compliance policies and procedures, the department has agreed to defer prosecution of criminal charges against Novo for a period of 3 years. If Novo abides by the terms of the agreement at the end of the 3-year period, the department will dismiss the criminal information. The Oil for Food program was established by the United Nations to enable Iraq to sell its oil for humanitarian purposes in the context of an extensive international sanctions regime. The Oil for Food program mandated that the proceeds of oil sales be deposited in a United Nations bank account, and that those proceeds be used by the Iraqi government only to purchase humanitarian goods and services, such as food and medicine approved by the United Nations. Beginning in 2000, the former Iraqi government began requiring companies wishing to sell humanitarian goods to government ministries to pay a kickback, often mischaracterized as an after-the-sales services fee, to the government in order to be granted a contract. The amount of that fee was usually 10% of the contract price. Such payments were not permitted under the Oil for Food program or other sanctioned regimes then in place. In a related matter, Novo reached a settlement today with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, on a compliant and agreed to pay over $3 million in civil penalties and over $6 million in disgorgement of profits, including prejudgment interest, in connection with contracts for which it paid kickbacks to the former Iraqi government. The case is being prosecuted by Fraud Section Senior Trial Attorney Jonathan Lopez with assistance from paralegal specialist Sarah Marburg. The department acknowledged and expressed its appreciation for the significant assistance provided by SEC's Enforcement Division in the ongoing oil for food investigation. And isn't that just so interesting that they were giving kickbacks to the very country where the Tower of Babel had once dwelt, where the people came out of Jerusalem, where the Garden of Eden was, to dwell in Shinar, where the Tower of Babel was built, which eventually became Babylon, and Babylon is getting essentially these kickbacks from the pharmaceutical company, just demeaning the country of Iraq. As you know, Joe Biden tried to put a cap on the cost of insulin to be something like $35, but when I see what it is, it's like over $1,400 for 3 boxes worth of insulin pens. So then I just kind of looked up to see if there was any new information about Novo Nordisk, and this was posted September 24th of 2021, and it says, facing lawsuit over insulin pricing disclosures, Novo Nordisk inks $100 million settlement with disgruntled investors. I won't read the whole article, but this was from fiercepharma.com, and it says, in a court filing, plaintiff said that while other companies told investors that their insulin-related revenues would diminish as a result of pricing pressures, Novo Nordisk executives assured investors that the company was not subject to the same pressures and that its sales and profits would continue to grow. The news comes during a year in which Novo Nordisk's fortunes have risen thanks to its diabetes standouts, Ozempic and Rybelsus, and excitement over its new drug, Wegovy, hailed as a potential game changer in combating obesity. There's a little bit more here, and this was Tuesday, September 5th of 2017. Novo Nordisk agrees to pay $58 million for failure to comply with FDA-mandated risk program. The pharmaceutical manufacturer Novo Nordisk Incorporated will pay $58.65 million to resolve allegations that the company failed to comply with the FDA-mandated risk evaluation and mitigation strategy, REMS, for its type 2 diabetes medication, Victoza, the Justice Department announced today. The resolution includes disgorgement of $12.15 million for alleged violations of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act from 2010 to 2012 and a payment of $46.5 million for alleged violations of the False Claims Act from 2010 to 2014. Novo Nordisk is a subsidiary of Novo Nordisk U.S. Holdings Incorporated, which is a subsidiary of Novo Nordisk A/S of Denmark. Novo Nordisk U.S. headquarters is in Plainsboro, New Jersey. It says, when a drug manufacturer fails to share accurate risk information with doctors and patients, it deprives physicians of information vital to medical decision-making. Then it says, in a civil complaint filed today in U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia asserting claims under the FDCA, the government alleged that at the time of Victoza's approval in 2010, the Food and Drug Administration required an REMS to mitigate the potential risk in humans of a rare form of cancer called medullary thyroid carcinoma associated with the drug. The REMS required Novo Nordisk to provide information regarding Victoza's potential risk of MTC to physicians. A manufacturer that fails to comply with the requirements of the REMS, including requirements to communicate accurate risk information, renders the drug misbranded under the law. That article was put out by the Justice Department and from the website justice.gov. So after looking at all of that in its connection, that company's connection, to having their logo be the Apis bull deity of ancient Egypt, let's go back and look at the two witnesses and what happens to them in the city of Jerusalem, what the commentary says. And I'm starting in verse 8. It says about the two witnesses when they're killed, and I believe it'll be from the judgment of the Sanhedrin that's reestablished at the time that they're witnessing. They are proclaiming Jesus' final gospel message of salvation, and they reject it and everything. But the two witnesses are trying to get the people, the daughters and sons of Zion, to repent and accept him as their king. So they kill the two witnesses because they don't like the gospel message being there in Jerusalem. It says that they kill the two witnesses and their bodies remain unburied while congratulations and rejoicing go on. Harmony and concord prevail, as when Pilate and Herod were made friends. It is the millennium of evil, the paradise of fools who make a mock at sin, but the forms of the witnesses, though silenced, still in silent witness against evil. At no time are they hid away out of sight. Even in an age of religious and social anarchy, the silent tokens of a better order remain, as when in mockery and profanation the harlot was enthroned within Notre Dame, the very sanctuary walls which no longer echoed to the psalm of Christian life, yet bore silent testimony to the higher genus of the past. They are said to lie in the street of the great city. The city is described as the great city and also as Sodom and Egypt and Jerusalem. Do not passages like this show conclusively that to deny the mystical or allegorical sense of the apocalypse is to keep the husk and cast away the seed? The city is great, for it is all important in the eyes of the inhabitants, as public opinion is all important to the weak or the worldly. It is Sodom, for it is the place where, through pleasure and luxuriousness, fullness of bread, the worst forms of immorality take root. It is Egypt, for it is the house of bondage, where the wages of sin become tyrannical. It is Jerusalem, for it is the apostate place where the presence of Messiah, or Christ, is hated. The same spirit which slew their Lord is alive to persecute his servants. It cannot be that a prophet perish out of Jerusalem. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebub, which ironically, according to Off the Curb Ministries, he said that Beelzebub and Baal were symbolized by the calf, that had the sun disk. How much more of them, of his household, and the reason of this hatred is told. The words of the witnesses tormented them. The reproof of their gospel and the reproof of their example had been a torture to them in Jerusalem. There was a voice in them which echoed its voice, the voice of a convicting conscience and the voice of an anticipated judgment. And I was basically reading from Ellicott's commentary for English readers of Revelation 11, verses 8 through 10, about the two witnesses and how they're killed by what I believe will be the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem. And, likely because, the mark of the beast is going to be implemented. And that's the defilement, because she's betrayed God, her husband, which is the forehead, the whore or harlot's forehead, and the wedding hand, where the wedding band goes to say that you're married to your husband, which is, in their case, God himself. When this great city is fallen, there will be no more harpists. There will be no more bride and groom going on, because it'll be the end of all the earthly things like that, and the Lord will come as the bridegroom, which they've rejected him, and they've rejected his covenant in his blood when he paid the bride's price. So now is the time of salvation. Now is the time to turn your heart towards Jesus Christ, the Messiah of Israel, because he's coming fairly soon. We do not know exactly when, but all of these things being revealed right now show that he is close to coming, and you don't want to be left outside of the rapture event where he's appearing in the cloud, where he descends in the cloud to take the believers to be with him, and then closes the door so that people are left knocking on the door, let us in, let us in. It'll be too late. It's very disturbing to me to see that the Egyptian bull deity Apis, that was the golden calf of the Hebrews, that was against God, is the very logo on the pharmaceuticals, the pharmakia, by which the whole world is being deceived into having to take the medication because, you know, by her sorceries, the whole world was deceived. And of course, when they've taken out the nutrients out of our food, and they're putting all of these food products out that are causing people to have diabetes, it's just a diabolical plot, probably to kill off more of the population, which is part of their agenda, as we know. So I'm not trying to give any misinformation out or anything. I'm just trying to show you their logo and what they've been involved in the past, and how this connects to ancient Egypt. And Jerusalem is connected to Sodom and Egypt, called the great city called Sodom and Egypt, where our Lord was crucified. So that's all I had to say for this segment. This is part 4, and I hope you go watch the first 3 videos about mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots. With that, I'll just say good night, and I hope this blessed you. And please support my channel. I really could use some support, and I thank you for it. All right, well, good night. I hope that you found this interesting.